Hello, everybody, and welcome to another comedian's interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill, and my blog describes my experiences of watching over 1,000 stand-up comedians and counting over the last 47 years. I'm delighted today to welcome my special guest. It's Mr. Steve Bugeja. Yes! Hello! How are you?
Wow, you did warn me you were going to do quite an enthusiastic cheer, and you didn't disappoint on that at all. 1,000 comedians, that is a lot of comedians.
Yeah.
What, are they all different comedians?
Yeah. The first comedian I ever saw was in 1977 when I was 7. And I just thought, why not try and create a blog from an audience point of view, which I think is very unique. And it's just taken off. It's been extraordinary. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My absolute pleasure. You always make me laugh when I see you, and I'm delighted you're a guest. We're going to go right back to the start of your career, if that's okay. And can you ask me, how did you become a comedian in the first place, please?
Yeah, so, very beginning, I was 19 years old, and I was working on a summer camp in America.
Right.
It was a thing called Camp America, so I was a student in England, and then I went for the summer to work with these, to look after kids at a summer camp, and they had a staff talent contest, which you could enter and do anything you want, it's like juggling or play the drums or something. And I, for some reason, just decided to have a go at stand-up. I don't know why. Like, I'd always liked the idea of doing it. I never dreamed of being a stand-up or anything. I just thought it'd be a cool thing to do. I thought, well, this seemed like a good environment to do it in because no one really knows who I was. There was no real risk, and also the standard talents I thought would be quite low. So I thought I'd just give it a go. And my friend Tom, who's a brand new friend, only met him that week. He was really into comedy as well, so he helped write the jokes with me. So we spent 3 days just sat when we should have been looking after kids, really, completely neglecting the children, writing jokes for my stand-up set. And we were just sort of became a bit obsessed with it. And then I did the talent contest. I think I only did 5 minutes, but all the jokes were about the camp. So it was very written about the camp.
Right.
So it did really well because obviously all the jokes were about the people watching. So everyone loved it, even though the jokes weren't that good. It was obviously about them. So I won the talent contest. Is what happened.
Congratulations.
I won $20, which actually was my highest paying gig for many, many years to come.
Wow.
So that's what gave me the bug, I guess, of starting comedy. And it was just one of those things. I got up on stage and I was very shy before that. I still am quite shy socially, but I always felt a bit left out and a bit socially awkward, and just felt a bit that I didn't fit in really. I know that's quite a common thing with comedians. And then suddenly when I did this gig, not only did I feel comfortable on stage and feel like I felt like I belonged somewhere.
Yeah.
After the gig, I suddenly had a bit more of a spring in my step. It's not like everyone was talking about it or anything. It just suddenly gave me a sense of fulfillment and purpose in a really small way that I think made me a bit more confident socially, which I think that combined with enjoying the actual gig itself made me think, oh, maybe this is something I should keep doing because it makes me feel like a better version of myself even off stage. I don't know if that's a healthy. They might say that sounds awful.
No, that is a wonderful answer because I found something I passionately love, and the blog I started 2 or 3 years ago when I turned 50. So it's taken me 50 years to really hone in what I want to do. My job is my normal job is an administrator, but administrator is so wide. And I thought to myself, if you can hone in on something that you love to do, and it's given me an enormous amount of confidence, so it must do if you stand up on stage and do it.
Yeah, I think it's that thing. As you say, it's not really about the act of stand-up that gave me the confidence. It was the feeling that I had found a passion.
Yeah.
I'd found an identity. It could have been, you know, if it had been playing the piano, it could have been that, you know, and that would have given me the same sense of confidence, maybe.
Yeah.
I guess it's a real shame it was stand-up.
No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So what sort of year are we talking when you went to Camp America?
So that was 2010.
Right. So did you stay in America, or did you come back to Britain and do the stand-up? Yeah. So you came back, yeah?
So I did, yeah. I was at the camp for maybe 7 weeks or something.
Right. Okay. So
that was right at the beginning.
Right.
I then got to host all the shows for the rest of the camp.
Right.
So if there was I think the kids did a talent contest, and then there was another thing, a music event. So I was always the host because I'd done the stand-up thing. So actually, I got quite a lot of stage time.
Yeah. And of course,
I wasn't being very funny, but I was talking on stage in front of people.
Yeah. And of course, compare experience as well.
Yeah.
You know.
Except the audience so the camp I worked on was for autistic children.
Oh, right.
Not the easiest group of people to laugh, I will say. They don't often get jokes.
Right.
They can take jokes quite literally, so it wasn't always the easiest gig.
No.
But the adults, my colleagues did laugh.
Good.
But it was amazing. To be honest, the summer was amazing. Looking after those kids was pretty life-changing. I actually did a TED talk. About last year, I did a TED talk about working on that kids camp.
Yeah.
Sort of how big an impact it had on me.
That's brilliant. So after America, you come back to Britain, and you have the bug for trying to become a stand-up comedian. The way you got into it, was it through pubs? You took a friend along for 5-minute sets, things like that, or was there a different way?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I was in Manchester.
Right.
I was at university in Manchester, which is actually a really great place.
It is, yeah.
Comedy, as opposed. London's obviously good, but London's just a bit more brutal.
Yeah.
And the opportunities are a little bit less good quality, I would say. Whereas in Manchester, everyone's really supportive because there's not really that many people.
Yeah.
And it just happened that when I was starting, there was a kind of batch of us who had started at the same time, who have now, everyone's sort of gone on to do quite well. So when I was starting out, so it took me a bit of time after I got back from camp to do it in England because I didn't really have the guts. But then maybe a year later, I started properly doing it. But in that kind of cohort in Manchester was Kiri Pritchard-McLean, who's
fantastic.
Amazing now. Brennan Rees,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Great.
Pete Otway, who's now doing host radio shows and stuff.
Yeah.
Will Duggan was in that group.
Oh, superb.
Ed Easton, who's doing lots of acting stuff. There's probably some others. But there was just a really good group of people who loved... Rhys James was in the year above me at university.
Oh, fantastic.
Year below me at university. And so he was he sort of was there as well. So there was sort of a really good group of people who loved comedy and were quite ambitious, which I think made a difference because we weren't just all doing it for a laugh or doing it to get drunk. We were all quite focused on getting quite good. And I think, if you ask any of them, I was definitely one of the worst starting out.
Get out! Really, stop putting yourself down.
No, I was really not good. The mistake I made was I would write too much new material.
Right.
I wouldn't hone my set, so I would write a new 5 minutes every show because I was addicted to getting the new material. But obviously, if you do that, you don't perfect it.
Right.
Whereas some of the others were much smarter and wrote a really great 10 minutes and then kept polishing it. Whereas I would be let's do another one. Which I think it has two effects. I think as a result, I became a better writer quicker.
Yeah.
But it took me longer to get good at performing because I wasn't polishing it as much.
Right.
Anyway, there was this really good group of us that worked.
No, they're all superb. I've seen the names that you mentioned, and having such a good grounding as well. It helps everybody become a better comedian. It's all experience. The more that you do, I always say to the comedians I interview, I can imagine it's all experience, good or bad gigs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think there's something about Manchester that made me, I think, was quite unique way to learn, because the gigs you're doing are, like some of them are like work in men's clubs in like Rochdale, and when I go on with my southern accent, you do have to be funny pretty quickly for
my home city's Carlisle, and coming down to London was amazing. And I have a very good friend in Manchester who is from Carlisle, who I used to go to all the comedy clubs in Manchester with him. So we used to go to the Frog and Bucket and the Dance House and everywhere. And of course the Comedy Store they took on as well. It's such a wonderful city. I always look at it as a mini version of London, because you can get across it in about 10 minutes. But it's got everything London offers, and it's such a good place to be. So I love
Manchester. I miss it so much.
Yeah. So when you initially did your the beginnings of your comedy, what did you talk about on stage, and has it differed over the years? Do you have specific themes that you talk about, or is it anything that comes into your head?
I think quite early on, I created the kind of, I honed in on the persona of being a kind of beta male, loser, bad with girls kind of angle. And that was just very true. Like at the time, when I was 19, that was exactly what I was. And so it wasn't that big a stretch. And actually, I don't think I was that self-aware that I'd realised what I was doing.
Right.
I think I was just writing. I just was sort of telling. So some of my earliest stuff was like funny, bad date stories that I knew they were funny, but I didn't quite realise why they were funny. And obviously they were funny because I was the loser in the story. And then when I sort of worked that out, that the joke has always got to be on me. Like, it's self-deprecating humour really consumes me.
Yeah.
That, I guess I honed in on that. But over time that has, because obviously now I'm a bit older, you can't, when you're 30, you can't be saying, never throw girls, because it doesn't really wash as much, it doesn't really work as much. But there's still like an evolution of it's roughly the same character. Like I always sort of think of myself, when I write a joke and I go, would I say that? Would my persona say that? I just sort of think of myself as the kid that was bullied at school who's now more confident.
Right.
So like, I'm a kid who wasn't cool and is now doing a cool job. And there's always that like slight insecurity in my head of being the bullied kid. And I just try and remember that whenever I do material or any kind of show, because that's, I think, that's my voice, I guess. That's my
very, very much so. And what I particularly love about that, that clearly comes across when you're on stage. It's the energy, the nervous energy, and the enthusiasm that you want to create to make the audience get on your side, and then you can say whatever you like.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's something inherently endearing.
Yeah.
If you're the loser in the. I've never been able to do kind of high status comedy where I'm like mocking somebody who doesn't quite suit me.
Right. So tell me about your writing process then for a routine or a show. Do you have a notebook that you take ideas from? Do you have an idea that comes into mind, or is it very last minute, or how does the process work if, for example, you're doing an hour-long show, say?
So I'm quite methodical with my writing, I'd say.
Yeah.
So when I was doing an Edinburgh show every year, pre-pandemic, I just knew I had to write an hour every year. So I'd always come up with ideas, just like, walking around. And then I'd write them in my phone. And then I would just sit down most days and have a notepad, which was titled 2015 Edinburgh. And then I would just write every day. And then I'd go to new material nights and test the jokes out. So I'm not someone who like improvises that much on stage. Like I do sometimes, but I'm very sort of scripted. Like I have to sit and write the idea out a lot of times to get the joke, and then when I'm on stage, I'll sort of work out what people are laughing at more than other things, and then I might improvise a bit in that area. but I don't just. I'm so envious of comedians who can walk on stage and just go, bin bags. What's the deal with that? And then they say something hilarious. I'm like, that would have taken me hours to write that. And even then, it wouldn't have been as funny.
So is it all based on the test laughs, or if you don't like an idea, you'll ditch it, or is it all based on audience reaction when you do the run-throughs?
Well, I think when you're starting out, you're just trying everything. You just write every joke you put together and test every single idea. Whereas now, I'm a bit more experienced. I'm much quicker at getting rid of material that I know doesn't suit me or isn't funny before I even test it. So I'll write it and I'll be like, oh, that's good or that's bad. So it's a little bit more efficient now, I'd say. But with Edinburgh shows, I guess when Edinburgh shows were really great for me. It's my favourite thing to do an Edinburgh show. And I quite early on, well, actually with my first show, I decided to do a story. And it was a true story that I kind of embellished. But it was about me picking up my friend's dad from prison and taking him to his daughter's wedding on his day release. And he'd been in prison for 18 years for a serious crime. And he was like near the end of his sentence, so he was allowed out for the day. And I happened to be driving past, so I took him to the wedding. And it's a true story, but then I turned that into a whole show, and that was my debut hour. And I found that so much easier to write than just writing loads and loads of jokes, because I had this I really love writing narrative. Love writing structured stories. So once I have the story, I find it so much easier to hang the jokes on, because you just go, all right, we've got a bit here where we go to a service station and I'm there with a potential hardened criminal in a service station. What's funny about that? And then you just write loads of jokes like that. That's easier for me personally than going, oh, what's funny about bathrooms? You know.
That is great, because the other creative thing I did, apart from the blog, the most creative thing I did, I wrote a script which I performed with a friend of mine in order to raise money for Comic Relief. And we did 3 shows, and it was a play which I wrote called The Applicant. And writing the story, you're right, I could put jokes in. The story was about it was basically me. It was about a chap who comes down from Carlisle to London. He's got a successful girlfriend, but he's never had a job interview. So each of the scenes is him having a job interview, and it gets worse and worse and worse as he goes along. And at the end of it, due to the plot, he dies when he gets given his favourite job. And the last scene is him at the gates of heaven or hell or whatever, and he gets interviewed by God. And he said, you can come in and interview corpses. And I shrugged my shoulders, and that's it. And it was the first script I ever wrote, and initially I wrote it for Edinburgh. But again, it was to hang the jokes on. So there's a lot of jokes about Carlisle United. There's a lot of jokes about my hometown. You know, and it was fascinating how I did it. And I always like to ask the question with the comedians, because a lot of them do start off at one point and go round and then end up. Is that how you do? You always like to finish off? Yeah. I think audiences connect with a story more so than they can with just a list of jokes. So, you know, people love hearing a story. So if you've got a good story and you've got a beginning, a middle, and end, you get away. Hang the jokes on it, and actually, I think you get away with a lot more because you can engage the audience. Very much so. Yeah. They don't get bored as much. I think an hour is just a long time for anyone to watch anything. I quite early on got into the storytelling. That's great. That's really good. It's a really good way of doing it. Yeah, I always loved it. It did mean then, though, that in every future Edinburgh show, I was sort of really keen to tell another story. But obviously, I was only 25. I didn't have that many stories. I didn't have many stories that could justify an hour show. So it became a little bit, you had to start making stuff up. Sure, But I definitely learned a lot. Like, there's no way I would have written the sitcom with Ian if I hadn't done those story shows in Edinburgh. Exactly, So, you won the BBC New Comedy Award in 2013. Congratulations. Describe the experience of entering the competition, winning the competition. Do you agree with competitions for comedians? What's your view of it all?
Well, I was a very new act, and I entered all of the competitions, and I was very keen. I looked up to certain comedians who had done well in the competitions. Like Joe Lycett was sort of a few years above me in the kind of Manchester pecking order, maybe 3 or 4 years above me. And I watched him do all the competitions and then obviously go on to great things. So I thought, oh, that's how you do it. You've got to do the competitions. So I entered all of them. And I actually did quite well initially. Like I got to the final of Laughing Horse and then just did that. Then I got to the final. Then I didn't do very. Then I started doing badly in competitions. I started overthinking it and writing too much new material rather than phoning a joke. So then I think a year went past and I sort of wasn't getting very far in competitions. And then I did the New Comedy Award and the heat in Manchester. So you get put through to the first heat or whatever. There's like however many heats in the country. And in my heat was Dane Baptiste, me and a bunch of, 6 other people. And Dane just smashed it. Like, he absolutely smashed the game. And he beat me, hands down. And I was like runner-up or something. But runner-up didn't get put through. Only the winner got put through. So I was basically knocked out of the competition. But then I got put through as like best runner-up into the semi-finals by the judges or something, or the producers. So I suddenly had like a second chance.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, right, if I didn't win the heat with my material, there's absolutely no way I can win the semi-final because I'm going to be up against Dane Baptiste and all the other people who have won their heats. So what I decided to do, which now I look back on it, was extremely bold. And I'm not sure I have this great thing now. But I wrote a brand new set that was like designed to be good for a competition. So it was a very tight 5-minute set where I read out facts from a book about myself, and they were just basically silly, self-deprecating one-liners.
I love the sound of that.
I spent days and days, right, like just weeks and weeks working on it, and I'd go to new material gigs in Manchester and just test it over and over again. But actually, it's quite easy to test because you could read out like 50 of them, and then you work out which ones get the laughs, and then you just put them all together. So actually, it was kind of, I sort of did a bit of a cheat. So then I really amped up the kind of geekiness, and I wore like a red knitted jumper. I sort of went on a bit nervous and a bit like more joking than normal. And it just sort of worked. Like it just kind of like, because I guess what happened was everyone else just did their normal material, and then I had this thing that was slightly different. Not even that different, but it was just very defined. Like the persona was very clear. And it was only because I'd done badly in the heat that I bothered to change it. So then, I won the semi, I guess. I got through to the final. And then the final was a public vote. And I think I think it just connected. I think because it was like one line after the other, it just sort of audiences could follow it quite easily on the radio.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why I won. I don't necessarily. There were some really great comics in that final.
Sure, yeah. But well done, you. Well done, you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was great. And I don't know if I'd still be doing it if I hadn't won that. Cause I think
I was just going to ask because you won it. Has it helped your career? Has it given you more confidence to do more? Or presumably it's a very positive thing, obviously, to win.
I think the biggest thing it was, at the time when you win it, you think your life's going to change overnight and you think you're going to become hugely famous straight away. That isn't actually the benefit of winning a competition. So there was a few like tangible benefits, which were I got signed to an agent, which was quite big.
Yeah.
And it kind of helped make the step up from being an open spot to start doing paid work, because it was like, oh, he's the guy who won the New Comedy Award. So it like made that jump a bit smoother. But to be honest, the biggest thing I got was the confidence. Like it gave me a sense of, oh, I can do this. Because I think I'm particularly someone who's sort of riddled with self-doubt. And I think early on that can really stifle you.
Sure, yeah.
And I think it just gave me a shot of confidence I needed at exactly the right moment to kind of spur me through until I actually sort of had the confidence naturally. so yeah, it was a really important moment for me.
That's brilliant. That's so good. That's so good. Following on from that, how do you cope, if at all, with any nerves before you go on stage? Do you get nervous at all before you go on?
Not so much anymore.
No.
I'm pretty. Yeah, I don't get. I mean, I get excited. I get butterflies if it's a big gig, or I might get nervous if it's a new material gig because I'll be thinking, "Oh God, I haven't learned these jokes as well as I should have." But no, I don't tend to get nervous. Like I did when I was younger. I definitely did, and I think the way I dealt with it was I just. I'd always make sure. I mean, it sounds obvious, but I'd always make sure my first joke was good.
Yeah.
And settle the nerves, So if you go out and you do a good first joke, you just immediately feel more confident.
You're away,
laugh, and then your nerves kind of go quite quickly. So I guess I may still do that now, but I guess it's the most obvious advice in the world: start funny.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's good for that in terms of the audience will like you. But actually, it's really good for just letting you relax because you've won some trust immediately.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting because when I ask the comedians, a lot of them are nervous. I think nerves is part of it, but I think the more experience you've got, the lesser it gets, and it's right to have a bit of nerves before you go on, I would presume. But then once you're away and once you're actually on stage, they go away like that, and you've got the audience, and you're determined to make them laugh, etc., etc. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you always have a few nerves. I think some comics get more nervous than others.
Yeah.
I'm not one of these ones who has to pace around loads, but I do have that moment when I'm side of stage waiting for the. I might be a little bit more anxious just as I'm about to go on. But
sure.
I do find now when I walk onto the stage, I just feel
you're away.
Like I belong and I'm so excited to do the gig. So I guess it's excitement more than nerves.
I think so, yeah. And following on from that, how do you remember all your routines? You touched on it before with writing notes down, but do you have points in your head where to go to? I think the storytelling would help again.
Yeah, but it depends what it is. So if it's a new material gig where I need to learn the jokes, I do literally just sit and learn it for ages, and I'll write it in a Google Doc, and it'll be bullet points. I'll just try and get it down to bullet points, and then you only have to remember the bullet points.
And you're away.
I'm pretty good at remembering material now. I've never liked writing. Some comedians write on their hand. I've never done that because I've got a phobia of ink on my skin. Really?
I think that's a cheat when they do that because they keep looking. It doesn't work.
I actually think it's a bit of a crutch because I think if you know it's there, you don't remember it as much. But it works for some people. It doesn't. So I'm quite good. And actually, when you're doing an Edinburgh show, you're right. The story actually really helps you remember the jokes. Because if you just remember the story, you'll remember what jokes trigger off it. So. Yeah, I think if you just do it every night, your memory gets.
Oh, once you get into it, And do you find it better when you're learning? Do you have to have somebody there, or are you just on your own doing it?
No, always on my own.
Always on your own, because I'm just thinking about when we did the play. It was better for me when there was somebody else on stage because you could banter off them. But I suppose being a stand-up comedian, because you're out there on your own, you've got to do it from the starting point on your own. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there have been occasions where I might have run the jokes past my housemate or something.
Yeah.
Particularly at the beginning. I think at the beginning I maybe used to rehearse it more, like
sure.
Like it was a play.
Yeah.
But not so much now. Now I'll just write it, look at it quite a few times, and then walk out on stage and do it.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about trying to keep it as natural as possible, because the downside of my method is you learn it too much, and it becomes a bit rigid and a bit scripted.
Yeah.
So I'm now getting a bit better at kind of remembering. I remember the punchline, but just remember the rough idea. Don't remember word for word. so that when you say it on stage, it's a bit more natural and a
Sure.
bit more
Yeah.
colloquial, rather than how you'd write it on a Google Doc. But that's taken me years to get that kind of confidence. Like, definitely at the beginning, it was very much like I'd write it out word for word, and I would almost just say it as if I was
You remember, you look at somebody like Frankie Howard, who was very good on stage, where he would, you would think it was natural, but every ooh or ah was written down, and he would be reading it off an autocue. It was extraordinary when you think about that.
It's really interesting. I'd never used an autocue before. And
wow.
I did some gigs in Denmark, where with a Danish comedian out there called Simon Talbot, and he wanted an English support act. So I flew out there. It was amazing. We did 3 gigs. He's really famous out there, so he sold out a nice room. And he was doing new material, and he's like, "Oh, you could do new material as well." I was like, "Oh, great." And he's like, "I use a teleprompter, an autoprompter at the back of the room," and I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, it'll be there at the back, so you don't need to remember your jokes. It'll just be on the back." And I was like, "Oh my god, this is brilliant!" So I typed material into this machine, and then I went on stage. Honestly, it's one of the best gigs I've ever had in my entire life. Because I wasn't spending any energy trying to remember the jokes. It was just like there in bullet point form in front of me. Oh, it was.
That's brilliant.
I'm like, where's the damn autoprompter? Like, it's the best I've ever done a gig.
Wow, that is brilliant. That is so good. Let's move on to Edinburgh proper. We did touch on it before. I've been very fortunate to be able to go to the Edinburgh Fringe since 2005, up until the pandemic. I go every year. It's my holiday. I go there for a week, and I see about 50 shows. I'm exhausted by the end of it, but it's just the most amazing experience. As soon as you step off the train, the atmosphere is incredible. What was your very first Edinburgh Fringe like?
So I went the summer after I did summer camp. I thought I would go for a few days to see what it was like, because everyone was talking about it, and I'd never heard of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
No.
My family aren't into the arts at all, so I didn't know what it was. So I just thought, well, I'll go for 3 days. 4 days. I've got a friend in Edinburgh. I'll just go stay in a hostel, and then my friend will come through and we'll watch some shows together. So I get there. I don't know a single comedian. And I'm staying in this horrible hostel in Cowgate.
Right.
And full of loud people having sex, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is terrible. And I'm walking around the Fringe, so I didn't realise it'd be this big. I didn't think it would take over the whole
it's massive.
And I'm just walking around so intimidated, so scared. And then we'd go to some shows, and it was really fun. But then my friend would go home because he lived in Kirkcaldy. So then I would just spend most of the time on my own walking around Edinburgh. And then I met Rhys James, who I did know from university. So I knew him, and bless him, he welcomed me into
fantastic
group. And I think I had a few nights out with comedians. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, okay, you can be part of this group. Like there's like a tribe that you can join here. And that was probably the first time I really felt like I belonged in the industry.
That's brilliant. That's so good.
Small part, but Edinburgh's crazy.
It's incredible. I mean, what I like to do is not only support the bigger comedians, but I support the up and coming ones as well. So I'm there with a spreadsheet about May time, deciding on days what I'm going to go and see, and then invite everybody who wants to come along. And it's such a diverse program. The majority of it is comics, but we also do plays and music as well. Not so much music, but I would say 80% is comedy, because it's the hour-long format is so brilliant, because you can do 4 or 5 in a day if you want.
I mean, it gets quite costly.
Yeah, it can, but I thought, why not? Other people go abroad. I do that.
When I went as a punt, obviously, and I think Kevin Bridges had just got big.
Oh wow!
Big. And I went and watched him at the Grand, which is the big room.
Yeah.
And I was just mesmerised. I just couldn't believe that I was seeing this guy that I'd see on the TV, and he was like my favourite comedian. and I just, that's when I fell in love with the Fringe, because I was like, oh, this is where it all began for him. Like, he said that. He said like he was in a small room earlier on that month. Like it all changed from in 1 month. And I think that's when I realised the sort of how the Fringe relates to the comedy that you see on TV.
The first year I was there, 2005, you couldn't get in. It was Alan Carr's year, and we did see Michael McIntyre in a tiny hut, Sarah Millican coming through, Russell Howard coming through, and it's wonderful to watch them develop. You know, that's part of the reason why I write the blog. You're a classic example where it's wonderful to see you develop. I first ever saw you on a lunchtime showcase for Mervyn Stutter, and you blew that audience away. It would have been about 4 or 5 years ago, no, longer, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. And I thought, this guy's hilarious. And so I researched you, and I wanted to go and see much more of you, so I did. And whether it was wherever it was, in London or Carlisle or wherever, you know. And it's wonderful to watch comedians like yourself grow, and that's the magic of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the magic of the Fringe, really, that you can literally progress, watch them progress year on year. And I think what's lovely about the Fringe is you sort like, although it is a solo thing and you're on your own doing it, you are also in like a cohort of friends who are doing it as well. So you don't feel quite as isolated as maybe you do the rest of the year. Because you could just go meet your mates for a pint, and they've done a show that night as well.
Exactly,
That's a nice... It's a rare moment in comedy where you feel part of a team, I think.
Very much so. So when you went each year, did you progress from, say, a 20-minute set on the Free Fringe, or 3 of you were doing it for the hour on the Comedy Zone, for example, or was it straight away your hour-long show?
No. I started. So my first show was in a bar called the Globe Bar at 11 p.m. till midnight.
Perfect.
Not prime time, you wouldn't say. And it was a sports bar that showed international sports. So obviously, the time difference often meant that it was on at 11 p.m. So the bar was so loud with Spanish sports fans and stuff like that. And we were just in this little room, me and 2 comedians called Red Redmond and Eddie O'Dwyer.
I know them,
Both from Manchester. And we had this, there was not even a door that separated our room from the bar. It was just a curtain, and a curtain that was very rarely closed. And the room probably held like 20 people on chairs. And we'd all do 15, 20 minutes each. And it was a real learning curve, because you got to do gigs every single night, and you just get better, quicker. But we did have to fight with the noise every single night. But that was really lovely, because you're doing it with your mates, and you feel like you're doing something exciting, you know.
Very much so, yeah.
So I did that we did that for 2 years.
Yeah.
I think the second time we did it at 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. rather than, so we went up a time. And then I did, what did I do then? And then I did a package show, which is where sort of it's organised by a promoter. You have to audition to get on it. And it's kind of a bunch of new comedians. So I did the lunchtime, it was called the Lunchtime Special. And it was in the Tron downstairs in Edinburgh, just off the Royal Mile. And on my bill was Brennan Rees, Laura Lex,
superb.
Pianovelli.
Oh, right. Wow, what a bill.
It was a strong bill, now you look back on it. And had a great time. And also you sort of, suddenly I was thrust into the group of people who were really flipping good. So you have to work harder at that point. And then also that year I did my own solo show, but only a 35-minute show, on the Free Fringe. And that's probably where I learnt the most, because I was just on my own, doing a show in this tent, again, in a very loud bar in the Three Sisters, huge bar that you can and it's in a big courtyard, and it's just a tent, like the thinnest walls. And it was great, though. You'd pack it out every night, because it's free. And any night Friday, Saturday was a nightmare. It was an absolute write-off. It was like 7 p.m. and it was just too loud outside. But any other night, it was actually great. And I did 35 minutes and I pretty much did. I wrote loads of new jokes, so I should try out jokes all the time. And I think that is where I really developed the most. That in that month, in that tent, and sometimes they still have that venue, and when I walk past it, I sort of shiver and think about some of the tougher nights that went on in that tent. But yeah, so I did that, and then I so it's quite boring now. And then I did the Comedy Zone.
It's never boring.
I did the Comedy Zone, which this was after I'd won the New Comedy Award. I got signed to Avalon, who ran the Comedy Zone.
Yeah.
So then that was my first show in the Pleasance.
Who were you on with the Comedy Zone?
Well, we actually did the last ever Comedy Zone.
Right.
We sort of killed it because it'd been going for like 25 years and it launched so many famous comedians had done it. So we were like we didn't know it was going to be the last one at the time. But it was me, Adam Hess, Jack Barry, and Alex Smith.
Oh, fantastic!
It was sort of about the time where having 4 straight white guys doing comedy wasn't a great idea. It was like, understandably, it wasn't the most well received show. Because it's supposed to be like, this is the future of comedy.
Yeah.
And effectively what they were saying is, well, the future of comedy is just 4 white men, which it turned out that wasn't true. But we had a great time. And, but after that, I think Avalon thought it was too much hassle to
so your first
the
solo...
Free Fringe sort of blew up by then, so it actually made much more sense to do things in the Free Fringe and then do rather than the paid Fringe.
So your first solo show, was that a year or 2 later then?
That was a year later.
A year later. And that would be when?
Yeah, so my day release, my solo show was 2015.
15, and then you've been doing year ones up to 2019.
Up to 2019, yeah.
When we were forced into lockdown, which was criminal. And I hope to God we go this year with the Fringe, because they're celebrating 75 years. And in August I'm 55, so there's a big celebration as well.
That's the main celebration.
Of course. Before we move on, I'd like to give you a round of applause because last year the sitcom Buffering was one of my favourite of the year. I howled with laughter at it. I loved every episode. This is the ITV2 sitcom you created with Ian Sterling. It was a perfect cast. Can you tell me, is there a different approach to writing sitcom as opposed to writing live stand-up?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for your kind
My
words.
pleasure. I absolutely loved it.
It means the world. We poured our sort of heart and soul into it, and we worked so hard.
Yeah.
And making a sitcom is more difficult than I could really explain.
I hope there's going to be more.
I'm not allowed to say.
Well, I want more.
No, writing a sitcom is very different. Yeah, it's very different. First of all, it's collaborative. So you're writing with other people. And also, actually, the story is far, far more important than the jokes.
Yeah.
And the characters are the most important thing. So it's very different. It's completely different, really. The only similarity is the ability to know how to write a joke.
Sure.
But I love it. Like, all I've ever wanted to do is write a sitcom. That was always my dream. And I've been writing scripts every year since I started comedy, really, of various standards. And with various people as well. Never actually with Ian, but with other comics and other friends. So I'd written probably about 10 sitcom episodes by the time we got the chance to pitch Buffering. So that's sort of why Ian got me involved, because he just sort of knew I was a bit of a sitcom nerd. So then we wrote it together. We never really thought it would get commissioned, because you sort of don't. You don't really think you've ever got a chance. And then it did get commissioned. We actually got told when I was at Edinburgh 2019. I remember it was the first day of the Fringe, and I had a really bad show.
Oh, mate.
And then I got the phone call And I was actually in a hairdresser's, and Ian rang me and was like, "Mate, the sitcom's been commissioned." And then that moment, the hairdresser called me over and sat me down on the chair, and then I couldn't tell anyone for like half an hour. I just had like the biggest news, the most life-changing moment ever, and then I had to just sit in silence with this hairdresser. She didn't care about a sitcom. She didn't care. I told her she didn't care. So that was a weird moment. And then, but you know what Edinburgh's like? We're so obsessed with Fringe, you sort of lose sight of what the real world is like.
Yeah.
So even though I had this sitcom commissioned, and I was very excited, I remember that night I did my show and I'd sold maybe half the tickets or something. I wasn't very happy about how many tickets I sold. And my agent came in. It was the first time she'd seen me, my manager Katie, and she came over and she was like, "Congratulations!" And I was like, "Oh, it's fucking shit. I've only sold half the tickets. This is rubbish." And she was like, "God's sake, Steve, are you ever going to be happy?" I was like, "No, I don't think I am. I think this is it." But it was amazing. It was literally a dream come true. The pandemic massively altered the process.
Helped you enormously, yeah.
We filmed 2 episodes in 2019, so like December 2019. We had to do that very quickly. So it got commissioned in August, and then we filmed it in November. So we probably had too short a period of time to write those episodes, really, now we look back on it. But, you know, it was just how it was. Like, it had to be on TV by the summer 2020, that was the plan. So we were going to film 2 episodes before Christmas and then 4 episodes in like March or May, I think it was. So we filmed these 2 episodes, but then obviously what happened is the pandemic delayed the whole thing by a year. So we had these 2 episodes in the can, but then we had an extra year to write the next 4 episodes. Which I think was actually a blessing in disguise because it allowed us to really spend much more time on the episodes and really not rush it as much because we were under a huge amount of time pressure. So that was actually not, obviously the pandemic was awful, but it did, the slight silver lining for us was that we had a bit more time to write the sitcom and Ian was a bit more available because obviously he was very busy.
So where did the idea come from for the show?
The first nugget of the idea came from Ian being a kids' TV presenter.
I was just going to say, that's how he started, wasn't it? Yeah.
He sort of hated kids. We thought that was funny. It is based largely on his career, but we thought that's a funny world.
Yeah.
And we thought kids' TV feels like a funny world to kind of show from behind the camera. And then it kind of developed that we sort of thought, well, I sort of want to see a bit more of what Ian is doing in his real life. And then we sort of fleshed out his housemates. And then it became a kind of, you know, people in their 20s trying to, you know, live in London and get on with being young. So we had sort of 2 ideas that we meshed together, really. We had the kids' TV world and then the being millennials or whatever you want to call it. I hate the word millennials. But so yeah, that's how it sort of developed, basically. It wasn't like one idea that we went, oh, that's it. It was like a thing that grew.
That's great, yeah. And just one final question on it. The cast is made up of a group of comedians like Janine Harouni, who is fantastic in it. Was that with the idea in mind, was to get a group of comedians together, or did you audition, or how did that work?
Yeah, they all auditioned.
Yeah.
And we auditioned lots of people. There are different stories to each person. I mean, Janine had done her first Edinburgh, I think, in 2019.
Right.
And I saw her, I didn't know her, I'd heard her name, but I saw her at a gig in Edinburgh. We had just written the pilot, I think, at that point. It had just been commissioned. And I just saw her at a gig and I thought, oh, fuck, that's Talia.
She is very good.
And I didn't say anything to her, obviously. So I want to go up and go, all right, we've never met. Do you want to be my sitcom? But I didn't know she could act or anything. You know, so it turns out she's a trained actress. I didn't realise that. So then we just made sure she came into audition and she absolutely nailed it just straight away.
Brilliant.
And then it was similar with Jessie Cave. Jessie Cave. So
she's superb.
Yeah, she's so great and she's so perfect for the role. And the role obviously is very engineered towards Jessie.
Yeah.
And then
so you tailor-made them for them. You tailor-made the role. Once you've got the characters.
Yeah, and then the rest of them just all auditioned, and they were all just brilliant. They were just the best people. We had so many people, really good people though. It's a really hard bit of the process when you're deciding who's who. But we're really proud of the cast. Like, we love them.
Brilliant.
They all really. I think it helped that they were all quite young, and no one was, too big.
Yeah.
For the boot kind of thing. We were all just really excited to do a sitcom together.
Fantastic. Well, please keep making them, because I absolutely love them, and I know it's been a big hit for ITV2. So congratulations on it. Let's move on. Who are your favourite comedians, past and present? Massive question.
I mentioned Kevin Bridges. He was always my favourite early on. Sarah Kendall, I absolutely love.
Oh, superb!
Her Edinburgh shows. They're incredible. Like, her long form storytelling is just better than anyone else I've ever seen. I love her. Who else? I mean, I sort of flip between people. I really enjoy John Mulaney, or Netflix specials and stuff. I really love Mike Birbiglia. He's a storytelling American comedian who does sort of nice long form storytelling shows again on Netflix. And actually, I'm going to see him in Leicester Square Theatre soon.
Brilliant.
He's one of my favourites. I love loads of comedians, really. But I do tend to love the storytellers, like the long form storytellers who can sort of string a nice story. Yeah.
And following on from that, like me, do you go to a lot of comedy gigs as a member of the audience?
Well, I didn't used to, actually, because when I started gigging, I was just gigging all the time. So I would be at a gig, and obviously I would watch it because I was there, but I wouldn't then want to go to one in my spare time. But now my life is a bit more balanced with writing and gigging.
Sure.
I do tend to go to shows more, so I'll go to Soho Theatre and see what's on, which is nice, and it's actually really lovely to remind yourself what it's like to be an audience member.
Yeah, of course.
And remember,
I love it.
It's the best. It's the best thing in the world. But it's sometimes really hard, because when you're doing gigs every single night of the week and you're on that side of the curtain, you sort of forget how exciting it is to be in the audience and what it feels like. And I think it's good to remind me sometimes how much I love comedy, and the way to do that is to watch it. I'm not worried about being on stage myself.
If you're on a comedy bill, do you tend to stay and watch all the acts?
I tend to.
Yeah.
It depends. Depends what I'm doing. If I'm tired.
Yeah.
That's largely the reason.
Yeah. The reason why I ask those two questions is that there's a section in my blog called The Ones That Got Away, and I've written 25 comedians. I've written about 25 comedians who have either passed on or I haven't had a chance yet to go and see. And top of the tree for me, the reason why I love comedy is Morecambe and Wise in the 70s, where everybody, all the family would go watch them on the TV, and no matter how old they were crying with laughter. I just think they were geniuses. The people I did see, I saw Les Dawson in 1977, and then I saw Tommy Cooper, and it went on into the 80s with the alternative comedians, and then right up, I go every week now to loads of different comedy gigs, and I just absolutely love it. There is something special about sitting in an audience with when the lights go down, and you never know what you're going to get. You never know what you're going to expect, because you're in the moment, you're in the room, and it's an extraordinary feeling. It must be incredible for the comic.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's easy sometimes to forget how exciting that is. When you do it so many times, and I try and remind myself how lucky I am to get to go on stage, because especially when you do, like, the gigs I've seen you at are the ones in Kennington with James Gill, and they're just such a joy to play, and you leave that gig just feeling alive.
It is amazing. I don't know how he does it week in, week out, but he's got a very special talent of involving everybody, I think, and if everybody's involved, it's easy for the comedian, but they've still got to go out and kill it, and the majority of them do. You were hilarious when I've seen you there, absolutely hysterical.
But that gig is just a joy to play, because the audience are in such the right mind frame. They're just James just gets them perfectly set up to be generous audience.
And it's the room as well. I was looking for a fringe venue in London and the room is perfect to play with the acoustics and everything.
Yeah. Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah.
I think it probably only holds like 70, doesn't it?
It's about 80 or something like that.
80, yeah.
Okay, well, I've much enjoyed talking to you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Just before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to plug? Where can people find you on social media? Have you got any gigs coming up, or any books or podcasts or anything?
Yeah, just come follow me on social media at Steve Bugeja, Bugeja, that's how you spell it. On Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. Just on TikTok actually, because that's where all the kids are. And not for the kid. I'm doing it to promote my
TikTok is beyond me. I'm still learning TikTok.
Yeah, I'm still learning it. And yeah, go watch Buffering. That's the only other
yes,
thing.
Please do. Yeah, it's great.
ITV Hub.
Yes.
Still be there.
Well, my friend, I'm so looking forward to seeing you live again soon. And thank you so much for your time, for such a wonderful chat. I've really enjoyed it, and all the best to you.
Oh, lovely. I've really enjoyed it too. Love to see you, Richard.
Thank you. All the best to you.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.